afternoon. Welcome to Pakhuis, Zwijger. This always has been one of my favorite venues in Amsterdam, and it is quite a peaceful place, and it still is one of the vibrant places in which you see what Amsterdam as a city of debate stands for. We are so happy that we have been able to get the opportunity to have this small debate here. And later on you will also have a lecture by Christian Boret about the productive city. My name is Olof. I'm, as you call it, voorzitter van Stichting Europan, which translates as president of the Europan Foundation of the Netherlands. I will be today hosting the meeting, but most of all I will invite you to participate in this debate. So what is the debate about? It's about Amsterdam, it's about productivity, and it's about how a city like Amsterdam may evolve, may develop the theme of productivity, new themes of productivity. And what does it mean spatially, economically, or maybe what does it mean in disrupting what we know up till now about what productivity does for a city. All these themes are part of the 5 sites that have been selected, sites that we want the architects of Europan, the participants of Europan, to think about, and to produce ideas about, and to maybe help make these ideas reality. Today has been about these sites. It has been about visiting the sites. It has been about finding out what really are the questions regarding the sites. And we are continuing this. So first of all, before I start, I would like to know who of you have been to the sites today? So that's quite, and you are actually participating in Europan?
Yes.
Which
yes.
Giacomo. Giacomo.
Yes.
Okay, so you will enter as Giacomo.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Giacomo. So what did you think?
I think that we have a lot of competitors, let's say,
at least 100
neighbors that are really interesting, so it's going to be a challenge to make something really new.
But you're up to the challenge.
Yeah.
Good, because we just found out that we have at least 100 participants now to Europan, and we're still counting. So that's going good. So Amsterdam, productive city, what is it all about? I think we should proceed to the 5 sites, because I'm quite sure that some of you have never seen the sites before. So maybe Sabine Lebesque, you are the one helping Europan with the sites, but most of all asking Europan to come up with ideas. Could you come here, please? We have the sites now on the screen. Maybe you could help us and say in just this one concise sentence, what is it about the sites that you like so much?
Do we have pictures of the sites to continue, or shall I just give a quick overview? Okay. Let's start with Pakhuis in Amsterdam North. That's the upper one. That's a kind of run-down business area what really needs some new interventions to fit with the developments that are going to be around it. Buiksloterham is a development area focusing very much on circularity, on sustainability. It gives a new vibe to the whole part of that Amsterdam North, but this corner needs a special attention. There is some development going on. There are stakeholders. The stakeholder is also providing a location to work on, so that is a good opportunity for Europan and participants to work on. Let's go to the left to Sloterdijk. We have 2 locations in a kind of same area, but they have a very different character. The right one is a business area with a school, a media school. Actually, productivity is there already going on very much, but we as a city like to change that area in a mixed area, more liveliness, less focusing on one mono kind of business thing. And there's also a school, so we like to combine that with housing, with new kinds of productivity in that strip of Sloterdijk 1, we call it, or Transformatorweg. On the left hand of that we have Sloterdijk Centrum, which is the Bjarkoplein, which is actually a parking place. And Sloterdijk is one of the areas where you, a lot of people say, I never want to be found dead in Sloterdijk. That image is changing very quickly, and that makes that the whole infrastructure, the whole site is actually dominated by infrastructure, by flyovers, parking space, and big offices from the tele time. That needs a new image, and we're looking for ideas to get that development going. Then let's go first to the south, to the Beunderman, Amsterdam Zuidoost, which is the H neighborhood, or the H-buurt as we say it, there is also productivity going on. So it's not that we have to bring that in, but a kind of productivity that is not long-lasting and not economically valuable enough to sustain and to stay. So also there is a challenge to bring something new in, together with the neighborhood activities already. So it's a totally other scale again than the other 3 sites that I discussed. And then the fifth, to be short, that's a very new area that we are going to redevelop from scratch actually. And the idea is to bring a new typology, also high-rise there, quite high for Amsterdam sizes until now. But it's not only about that, it is how do you create a new neighborhood with all the necessities that we like about urbanity. So it has to be housing, it has to be mixed housing, it has to be horeca, it has to be working, and all that together, that's the big challenge for such a neighborhood, and how to develop that in guidelines and how you can give that out to investors, that's the big question over there.
Okay, thank you. So it's about making the city and making the city work. Yeah. But Amsterdam is already used to making the city work. So what do you need Europan for?
Well, maybe you can say that since in the crisis, we felt really down in the crisis. So we were all focusing on ourselves. Architects didn't want to go into the city council anymore, felt really depressed, and we really had to focus again on the qualities of Amsterdam. And we did, we came out well. The attractiveness of Amsterdam is really great. I just thought this morning, I read in the newspaper, we are place number 1 for the millennials, so the most attractive city in the world for millennials. Well, I think that's true, because I'm not a millennial anymore, but I still like it here. Yes, and we have a lot to win. We could also lose some things. So it's now the question how we keep the quality of design, where we're famous for as well. And for that reason we also need new younger generations to work with the city together to make the city of tomorrow.
Okay. So you want to stay number 1 for the millennials, and therefore you invite millennials to come up with ideas.
Yeah. 39 and a half, you can still call yourself a millennial.
Good,
yes.
Good, guys, you're a millennial. Thank you, yeah. Sabine. So that is also, maybe I should explain a bit, that is also marking a slight change in what Europan is doing. Because up till now, Europan was very much focused on singular sites and singular cities. But in the Netherlands we thought that what we need more is how to make great cities, how to make cities work, and what can young architects offices with all the people that they also can attract, what can they bring to this? And then you don't need to focus on this one site, but you focus on the city. And we, as Europan, we decided we would like to more aid a city like Amsterdam with using design as a tool for negotiation, as a tool for narrative, etc. And then you need more than just the one side, but eventually 5 sites. So we're very happy that Amsterdam provided Europan with 5 sites and is challenging the architects to come up with these new ideas and to help them, to help Amsterdam stay attractive for coming generations. So how are we going to proceed? We have 3 small lectures, 5-minute pitches, you might call them. And they all focus on different themes. First of all, we invite William Stokman. William Stokman is sitting over there, researcher for the gemeente Amsterdam. And he is focusing on economic developments, and most of all on how do economic developments drive spatial developments, and how do spatial developments maybe harm economic developments or help them into even greater development. Then we will have a presentation by Joost Beunderman. Joost Beunderman is a Dutch social geographer, but also one of the directors of a London-based architect's office called 00. He wasn't able to come over, so we will have a Skype presentation, hence that screen over there. And we will close with a presentation by Gladek from Metabolic. And she's one of the persons that helps Amsterdam become the better city, but also is slightly more disruptive in the sense that she focuses on circular developments, circular economy. We will go into that later. But first of all, William, can I give the floor to you?
Yes, I just have to look for my presentation. Next slide. Thank you very much. Thank you for. I'm very happy that I can give here a short preview of a new spatial vision for Amsterdam, which was completely inspired by Europan last year. Last year I got from Daan Sandveld from Zwarte Hond the French version, Vie Productive. I could not really read it, but on the pictures I realized this could be something. It just needs an economic foundation. So Europan led to a spatial economic vision there. Next month this will be published, so I show you just the principles. To understand the spatial vision, you first have to understand the Amsterdam plan for urban growth, which is you want to grow inside the city. It's all about transformation. You see all these yellow locations, and these should be a functional mix of residential and work. And you see city centers and city streets. That's the base that we want to develop, and the yellow part is where the city will grow, basically inside the city. And that will cost a lot of brownfields to transform. We will build on brownfields on industrial fields. And the sum of these industrial fields is large. It's more than 50% of all the industrial fields that we have in Amsterdam for production. So production will change in the next 10 years. It will move to a different location, or it should be integrated. Therefore we needed this vision. And then, what do we replace it? Do we make these kind of areas? And you see in red, that is the economic function. Could be a supermarket, could be a coffee corner, could be a restaurant. But basically last 50 years we have built areas like this. And 2 weeks ago I saw in The Guardian an article on urban regeneration, and it said it should be different. We should not make these boring areas only with residences. And I hope we have an idea. Of course, Amsterdam will do that on certain places because we need a lot of dwellings, but perhaps not everywhere. Because will this foster the knowledge economy? Will this foster innovation? Will this be inclusive? We don't think so. To understand the importance of economic growth and the labor market, you have to understand this graphic. Amsterdam is a city, like all major cities, which is becoming an engine for economic growth and wealth creation. And you see in the Netherlands, in the crisis, it was stagnant. In the whole metropole, the development of labor was stagnant. But Amsterdam, since 2008, was rapidly expanding 2% every year. And this is something that is unique in the Netherlands. Perhaps you have it a little bit in Utrecht, but it's not unique in the world. All major cities are growing economically fast. This has the success of the city, and of course the success has a downside. And probably that will be the topic, partly from this and partly for debate for next year's, about payability and affordability and social exclusion. But jobs in Amsterdam are important not only for people in Amsterdam, but for a much larger region. And if you use the train on 9 o'clock, you will see where everybody comes from. So what do we do in this spatial vision? We use the principles of Europan about transformation and urban mix, because we see the power in that. We applied it on the urban strategy and we gave it an economic foundation. And therefore we want to use transformation and urban mix first as an economic competitive strategy. Basically that's fostering the knowledge economy, fostering the innovation economy, to have more environments for knowledge workers. But it should also be an inclusive strategy, so everybody can profit of the growth in Amsterdam. If we don't do that, Amsterdam will only be for knowledge workers, and nobody can be lifted on that success. So it has to have these both sides. We used some economic models that we already applied for the metropole, and basically they say sometimes you need large-scale office spaces, sometimes you need small-scale office space in urban areas, sometimes you need clustering near knowledge centers, and here in this scenario you need local entrepreneurship. And this local entrepreneurship is going to shift, as you saw in transformation. And then we said, basically this is a world-class business district, perhaps a world-class district because it mixed a creative area, an innovation district, or a productive area. And that's what we are going to design. And we do not know which area is the most important in the future. We think a diverse city needs all, and therefore they have to be adaptive. So a productive area, which is basically on ground floor, high ceilings, could foster the knowledge economy if it's not used. And the next Zuidas, perhaps, if we develop that, should be able to work for innovation, if innovation will be the driving model in the future. So what do we need? What do we mean as reference? Like an international business district in King's Cross, in the middle of the city, highly connected, an urban mix of culture, promotion, residences, retail, this whole mix, a place for everybody, could be a reference that we could apply perhaps in Marine Terrain or at the northern shore of the Ij. Somebody from Legato here? No?
No, but the architect.
The architect is here. I thought so. Thank you for this great design. We used it as an image for the creative area, but even this design could be applied for a productive area, because you see already these high ceilings. Now I see more office space used, therefore it's creative. But I think this design is also made for local production and this mixture. I think that was even the idea. This kind of type is like an extension of what we see in Amsterdam Center in a mix of creative industry. Then the innovation district. We have now a lot of monofunctional areas with office space, but the interesting thing is it also has these anchors. On Rica Polder we have the startup ecosystem in which the clustering and urban mix could work into an innovation district. And basically that's an area with 50% of work and 50% of residents. And the interesting thing is that this urban mix of work and residents creates this base for amenities, and that is the urban mix that everybody wants to live in. And the production, a production area. What should be in this production area? Well, this is an example of something that is now a business that is in Buiksloterham. It looks like an office. It's partly an office, it's perhaps mainly an office. It's also a modern production firm. It makes these baby carriers, and it does all these cycles of modern production, except not the real production, which has the smallest margin. Or this one, leave a space on the northern shore, and here in Brooklyn it fills with new kinds of economy. Or this in Rotterdam, they just leave the old structure and they put it up. And then you create a beautiful mixture of work and residence, and you see it works together. We can learn from Rotterdam. And even the city streets, they are not only for shops and living and interaction, but city streets could also be used for more productive integration for the places that you need once or twice a year. But they need logistics, so we put them near the highways. And this is the challenge for the architects, because how do we develop these productive areas? It is like Amsterdam goes back in the 19th century, where we do not make a division in work and residence. But it's not so easy. How to keep our city inclusive and not make only places for symbolic analysts, which most of you probably are, but also for production workers that need a little bit more space to work. And how to keep these places affordable. That's why we need your insights, your design, your perspective, and the city needs many more instruments and views to create this vision that we hope that will work as a new economic model. Well, I showed you the base. Next month, hopefully the board will decide on this.
Thank you, William Stokman. So William, please help me. You want to be competitive. I regard competitiveness as a bit more aggressive, as sorting out, and you want to be inclusive. So how would you combine this?
Cities, they are at this moment the engine of economic growth and wealth creation. So we need to have this economic growth into our city, otherwise even the whole metropole will stagnate.
Yeah.
So we need to do all this office space there, and we have to have this economic model. Otherwise, if it's not going to happen in Amsterdam, where is it going to happen? But we also need to be inclusive. So we have to have this balanced economy. If we forget about this, then this cannot function, because these are the drivers for the local production and for the craftsmanship and for production services. So 1/3 of the population is creating the wealth for the other one to grow.
Right. So basically, you want the productive people to be part of the city, and that's why you need these competitive.
Yes.
Okay. So that's your focus.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthijs van Ruiven. We've got Matthijs van Ruiven here. He's senior urban developer urban planner in Rotterdam. Chief. But also he is one of the jury members. So those of you who want to impress, please note that this one is the jury. Matthijs, what do you make of what William Stokman says? Because it's a very ambitious story.
Yeah, it's ambitious. I think you could, like you said, apply it to many cities. I think in Rotterdam we work on a same sort of strategy. Our economy is growing not that fast as in Amsterdam, but we can learn from Amsterdam as Amsterdam can learn from Rotterdam, as he stated, so that's good. The question that I have, that in Rotterdam there's still a lot of social development that is needed. Not everyone can work, and there are a lot of people that don't have a job, and well, it's not clear if they will work, say, in 5 years. So how could you include the social development of people in your economy? And that's a question we ask ourselves, and I think also applies to Amsterdam. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
think Rotterdam has so much economic chances at the moment that Amsterdam is going to be too expensive. For millennials, I cannot buy in here. Who can? So if you cannot live in Amsterdam, Rotterdam is a great city to live. If you can capture the millennials who can be creative and all these kind of structures, you will have an amazing economic growth, and that economic growth can be the base for social growth. So it's hard to start here and understand your focus on these areas, but you need a driver. You need an economic driver in the city, and I see in the statistics that Rotterdam is doing it.
Yeah. So please do not focus on Rotterdam, because we're focusing on these 5 sites.
Yeah.
And I think to translate your story is that you talk about competitiveness, you talk about productivity, but there's also a lot of people also in Amsterdam that somehow are left out. And how will that be part of what they are working on in this inclusiveness that you were talking about?
If we don't do anything, knowledge workers will take over Amsterdam. And people...
Are you afraid of knowledge workers?
No, but the only thing is then people who can profit from that as a model, they will live in Almere or Lelystad, and they will not even have the access to the city. We get complaints from the hospitals that say our hospitals are empty because our staff has to come on different hours. So the accessibility, the proximity is an issue here. We are so booming that the staff cannot even function here. Here is the model for more labor. If we don't bring labor near the areas, and proximity is even important for small-scale production, then, like people in Zuidoost, there are initiatives, and perhaps the business model is not ideal, but this entrepreneurship is there.
Yeah.
So you need the spaces that are not created in the 60s and 70s.
Okay. So it's about what type of city do you want to have? How do you want to live in the city, and how available and accessible should the city be? And that is, would you say, one of the main drivers of what these people will work on? Accessibility, affordability, to be able to foster economic growth?
Affordability. That's
Okay.
the most important.
Does anyone agree with that? Maybe I would ask you.
I work with the city together with William on this theme, so yes, we do agree, that's our strategy.
Good. So how would you work on this? Because is it a design question, or is it really something else?
It's most of all it's a strategy. I think the form in which it will occur, I think that will be a very interesting thing for this Europan competition, in the sense that we can plan and say what we would like and how we would like to mix, but the fact is, can it be, let's say, put forward in a way which is convincing, which is compelling, and which is showing all kinds of opportunities that from basic statistics or models you wouldn't capture right away.
So what would surprise you in a positive way when one of these people comes up with something?
That's difficult to say up front. But what I would be, let's say, I think all the types of combinations which let's say the productive areas, let's say production and living together, if we can find a combination for that, because those are the traditional combination which is being pushed out if you don't watch out, mostly because a price thing, but also because it is to combine with housing is always it's a hassle, it is noise, it is smell, etc. etc. If we can find good models for that, that would be interesting, I think.
Okay, so we've been working so long on this modernist view of separation. But Amsterdam is built on inclusiveness, and you want to redefine a new Amsterdam model, so to speak. Good, thank you. Does anyone have more questions for William Stokman? Any clues as to how you would design or... Good, William, thank you very much. Thank you.
will change to the next.
Okay, so then Eva Gladek. Please, Eva, come forward. Eva Gladek is founder of Metabolic. She was born in New York City. She grew up there, and then she decided to come to Amsterdam. Rotterdam first, okay. Basically, because maybe this is where your ideas on circularity may have a foundation. But what does it mean, and how do you work with this? That is something that we would like you to expand upon. Please, first tell me, how was it that you eventually decided to come to the Netherlands?
Well, I guess that's a more tangential and personal story. But in the I met some people that brought me here. So I started a company with someone who was Dutch, and that was a kind of circumstantial thing. But I ended up deciding to stay here for longer. It's in June this year, it'll be 8 years that I live here. Because of a lot of the opportunities and the way that the government functions, the sort of approach, the focus on design, it's really a great place to innovate because of the size of the country and how everything operates.
That's good to hear. Thank you. Please welcome Eva Gladek.
Hi. Yeah, thank you all. So listening to Stokman, I mean, I'm inspired to say so many things about the economy and a lot of other stuff, but I have to contain myself and focus on what I was actually going to be talking about. So the title of my presentation is Circular Cities, and I'm going to walk you guys through a few short things. First, about Metabolic, what we do, how the company operates, a little bit about the urgency and the global challenges that underpin the mission of my company, then a couple of examples of our work in Amsterdam, and finally some key questions that might, I don't know, trigger you guys to think about your own work in this competition. So first, I started Metabolic around 5 years ago. We're an unusual company. We're not an architecture firm. We're what we call a consulting and venture building company. We're an organization that's focused on taking an active role in transforming society towards a sustainable state. That's our main mission. We're trying to make the world more sustainable. And we do that by applying systems thinking. So we look at the world as a giant system. We try to dissect it and understand the different parts that are the structures that are there that are leading to certain outcomes that we want to change. And that's what we are focused on in terms of how we work. And we have a team here and also in Aruba. So the reason I started working in this field is sort of personal. When I was 14, I was going to be a biologist. I looked at this all the time. These are 2 flasks of growth medium producing E. coli bacteria. And if you've ever grown bacteria in a flask, which most of you probably haven't, you would know that on the right here you see a very clear flask, and for the first 23 and a half hours it looks like nothing's happening, it's all empty. But then in the last half hour, the flask goes from a quarter empty to half empty to full to all the cells being dead in a very short span of time, and that's because of the nature of exponential growth. So you really don't see anything going on for the first phase. So I was very familiar with this exponential growth curve. Then when I went to university to study molecular genetics, which is what I was going to do, I ran into these graphs in another class, and these show the same type of exponential growth curve, but not about that E. coli flask, but rather about our own sort of habitat flask, the Earth. And you can see that in every single one of these, around 1950, we start to see this massive spike in terms of resource consumption or impacts of certain types. And this is when our sort of impact on the planet became relevant on a planetary scale. So right now we're, through various human activities, causing the emissions of 2.5 times more nitrogen, for example, than all natural systems combined. So we've become a planetary force. And this is also by many scientists called the Great Acceleration. And of course, underlying that, there are huge amounts of issues, lots of different sustainability challenges that derive from different human behaviors, which I'm not going to get into because I'm sure you're all familiar. And one of the things that I was most interested in figuring out was, okay, so if we have this sort of flask situation, and we know that at some point we're going to hit a tipping point where everything starts to crash, where is that tipping point? And fortunately, I wasn't the only one thinking about this. In 2009, scientists from the Stockholm Resilience Center published this framework called the Planetary Boundaries, where they identified 9 key areas that we actually need to keep in control if we want to keep the planet actually functioning, barely habitable for humans. So that this can even be a lot more ambitious. But as you can see, the safe zone is in the middle circle in the green area, and for a few of these parameters, we've really crossed beyond that safe zone. So we're in a danger area. In particular for biospheric integrity, so we've lost 58% of biodiversity in the last 40 years alone. So that means that we're in the last doubling phase. So this is this sort of systems perspective that informs how we look at our work and how we make decisions. We were inspired by that, by all of this data put together to look at the entire global material flow. So we looked at 300 different data sources and pulled together information to understand, okay, where are resources coming from, where are we extracting them, and where are they ending up? And so all of these, this is a Sankey diagram, so all of these except for water are to scale. And at the end here, this is what's recycled. So when we talk about a linear economy, this is what that means. Almost everything is ending up dispersed or otherwise lost. And we determined, based on that analysis and lots of other things, what the priorities would be if we want to take this system and turn it into a circular one. And one of those top priorities are cities. They are what we call a leverage point, because they only occupy around 3% of the land surface, but they produce 80% of the GDP, as we just heard. They're responsible for 90% of the innovation by different metrics like patents, but they also produce 50% of the waste, consume 75% of the resources, and are responsible for 60 to 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions. This is extremely important because it means that if you can redesign cities, if you can change the way that they function or how they're structured, you can actually change these outcomes and address a majority of the problems that I just described. So they're a massive leverage point, and that means that architects and urban planners are really in control to a large extent, of course, working with cities for how this plays out. So that's the kind of inspiration and motivation behind why we need to design cities in a circular way. So with Metabolic, we decided, okay, we want to do something about this. We want to get involved in this particular leverage point. And one of the first projects that we did was design something called the Clean Tech Playground, a first circular neighborhood example for Amsterdam North. And we worked with many different partners. The project was initiated by a group of architects, Space and Matter, and Delva Landscape Architects, and a lot of others here in Amsterdam. And it started out by the city opening up this plot of land in Amsterdam North as a temporary 10-year development. And we thought, well, this is a perfect opportunity to actually explore some of these ideas of how you would restructure an urban area to be fully circular. So I think some of you have already been to the Keuvel, maybe some of you haven't. It's about 1 kilometer north when you take the ferry in that little box. It was a polluted piece of land. It's around half a hectare in size. And our total budget for the entire execution of the project was around €500,000. So very little money in the end for so many buildings. And you can see it's a wasteland. We also made use of waste materials and waste resources. So this is an exploration of how you can take lots of things of low value and combine them into something of higher value. The basic concept was to take houseboats that would be otherwise demolished and thrown away and put them on the land as temporary buildings, but upgrade them to very high levels of circular economy performance. And aside from that, the main thing that we were involved in was really designing the resource flows and the entire system that would allow this area to function as an example. So you can see urine is separately collected from grey water and kitchen waste and rainwater, and everything is processed into valuable resources. We had very high performance goals for the area. spanning also social as well as environmental metrics. And the process was actually very interesting because we finished this conceptual design, and a month later we had to get going and start doing construction, even though we were a very small organization without many resources. So this was one of the boats getting renovated. I'm just going to flip through some examples. That building on the top, that was the first boat that we got for €1, and at the end that's what it was converted into. A lot of very new skills that we had to figure out, like cutting a boat in half with a 36-hour time limit. And of course we built all the clean technologies together with the renters. So this is these are people who ended up renting one of the buildings as an office, building the wastewater treatment systems. We installed sensors and DIY'd a lot of these things to be able to monitor energy, water, and other resource flows, design this kind of interface. Another part of the plan that was very important was using plants to actually clean the soil to remove pollutants, because this was a polluted brownfield site, and still is. And then the momentous day in November 2013, when all the boats got craned onto the land, happened, and none of them cracked miraculously, because that was also one of the things that we didn't know. And today, De Keuvel is something like this. A quite unique office park with a lot of different experimentation for circular resource flow management. But of course, it's not about doing one small-scale project. It's about how you can take these principles and really scale them up to the level of a city. And how can you get that to apply within some sort of broader spatial vision. We did a lot of conceptual work for parties like the city of Amsterdam itself, but also AEB, the waste management company here, to start plotting all those resource flows and understanding how those would apply on a larger scale. And partly as a result of the inspiration of De Keuvel and that location in Buiksloterham, this kind of transformation, we began a project together with Studio 9 Dots and Delva Landscape Architects on the whole area of Buiksloterham, that whole industrial zone surrounding De Keuvel. I'm not going to get into this in too much detail, but Buiksloterham is pretty exemplary. I think lots of cities have this kind of industrial zone on the outskirts that is now getting expanded into and used for development, and this comes with a lot of unique challenges, of course. For us, the most important thing was that we wanted to set a holistic set of goals for how to actually do this in a circular way. And these are, you can imagine, these are sort of design boundaries that if you are designing something within Buiksloterham, it should follow these objectives in order to remain circular, and they're performance goals. So they don't say how you should do this, they just say this is what the outcome should be. So we had a set of these goals. If you're interested, there's a whole report detailing all of our research and the plan. And there's a lot of these interventions that are now planned in Buiksloterham and going to get implemented. So for example, this is struvite, nutrients extracted from human urine. That's something that we're doing at De Keuvel. And one of the things that, the ways in which this is getting upscaled is that Waternet, the local wastewater utility, is building a kind of new sanitation pilot plant, which is going to be extracting various resources from wastewater. So lots of different types of interventions. Most importantly also, with regards to productivity, is that actually you have to have a new kind of manufacturing, a new kind of circular approach to production that is compatible with residential areas. One of the most important outcomes of this whole project is that there was a manifesto that was signed by many of the important stakeholders, including the city itself, and this is now getting executed in various ways throughout Buiksloterham as a neighborhood. So, in order to design in a circular way, and actually our whole perspective on the economy has to be fundamentally different. You need to create different incentive structures. You need a whole different approach even to considering what is growth. And that's not something that we have time to get into, but I think it's important that that's also underlying in the work that you guys do with this competition. I'm just going to leave you guys with a few interesting questions around circularity. So one of them is, if we want to close all the cycles in the world in a productive fashion and make sure that we're not losing resources, what is the appropriate scale at which these should be closed? And we designed something called the circular city model, which describes 8 zones and talks about which cycles should be closed at which level. So things that are really ubiquitous, like water and energy, should be closed as close to as possible to where they're found. But things like electronics, obviously, you're not going to create specialized electronics recycling facilities at the level of each household. So you have longer cycles for those. But this, of course, really changes with the change in the cost of technologies, the availability of those technologies. So this is a flexible target. It's not like it's fixed. And it's something that's really important to think about. The other thing is that this has spatial implications because you need to put certain facilities in certain places. So this is an example from Hungary that I really like, a company called Biopolis, which is designing these greenhouse-based wastewater treatment plants that can double as a park. And so you have to start thinking about, okay, if you're going to close cycles in an urban area, you need to fit new types of infrastructure that have to potentially evolve or change in size to adapt to changes in population. So how do you actually design with this type of flexibility? And that question of time is the last one. I think this was already raised with the importance of upgradability and flexibility in design. But there's a new thing that I think can also be considered that is exemplified a little bit by De Keuvel. De Keuvel is a 10-year project. This is Kudu, a new modular living solution that is actually fully movable by crane. And there are lots of these kinds of things popping up. So can you actually imagine, instead of just designing in space, also designing through a timeline, and how different things can actually modularly upgrade or add on, and actually creating some sort of fundamentally flexible infrastructure. I think that this is something that needs a lot more thinking and exploration, but it could be a central part of the challenge for really designing truly circular cities. That's all I'm going to say.
Thank you, Eva. So first of all, any questions for Eva Gladek? Because I do. There's one there, which is, yeah. You are?
Hi. Oh, okay. Sorry. My name is Miranda and I work for the Spontaneous City. I was wondering how you feel, maybe this is also one of the questions that you wanted to raise. After William's speech about inclusivity, I'm wondering how you feel about this and also particularly about the project in Keuvel.
How do I feel about inclusivity?
Like from a circular perspective, what do you think circular economy could add to the wish for it to be inclusive?
Yeah. Okay, well I think one of the fundamental problems is that the current economic system is designed to concentrate wealth in extreme fashion. This is something that we just know, and there's so many horrifying or fascinating statistics that come out about this that now, you know, the top, I think 9 people own 50% of the world's wealth, and this number gets more severe every year. And I think until that fundamental structure within the economy is addressed, you're going to have trouble designing really inclusive cities because that it creates this sort of concentration effect. So I think you actually have to design places that break some of those economic models and rules by democratizing means of production, by creating spaces where people are able to legally build and exchange resources and products themselves. And also, if you create environments where your, let's say, basic resources are covered, like your water, energy, etc., that puts a lot less pressure on people who otherwise have to spend huge amounts of their income on these basic goods. So I think that that's one of the things that you can think about in designing cities. But this gets a lot more socio-political. It's not even just about urban space anymore.
Inclusivity is very political, no?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but the point is made, and also the fact that what William Stokman was talking about is we are challenging that, Inclusivity is, well, you may want to achieve inclusivity, but unless the whole economic system is changed, then it's sort of a utopian vision.
Well, I don't know. I think actually by designing different types of structures and places, you can start to subvert some aspects of the economic system. So that's one of the things. But then you have to do it as a conscious act.
So that's an invitation to subversivism.
I would say so.
Yeah.
But I think this merits a much longer discussion, probably over beer. So.
No. But then because I was wanting to ask you about how you would feel that Stokman was also talking about the rapid economic growth and the competitiveness of the city being a major or at least a global player.
Mm-hmm.
How would that translate into your circular city ideas?
I think, so that's one of the things that we actually do support. We think that cities should remain very kind of active, concentrated centers. That's also partly because of the slide I showed with cities being this leverage point. So it's great to attract more people here and create these very concentrated areas of activity, but then design them in a very different way.
So it's a designing question.
I think it's a design question. It's usually a design question, but it's a design question on many levels. Also, policy and taxation and spatial as well. So,
what would then architects do with policy and taxation questions?
I'm not sure, but I think that this is something that maybe should be more explicitly taken into a design process than it is now. Because I think when you do a systemic analysis and you're looking at a certain outcome, you want to design inclusivity, then you should probably map out, well, what are all the different factors that would lead to, let's say, equality or not, and see whether you can resolve those through purely spatial interventions or programmatic interventions, and if not, then maybe you run into some things that are outside of your domain of control, but still it's useful to identify those.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Then we also have another member of the jury here. His name is Mark Rabi. Mark, would you maybe comment a bit about what you just heard?
I was really thinking in the line of your last question that in the way the spatial designers here in Holland work, they have only a small influence probably on the whole development here in the city, because there's so many pressures. There's the pressure of intensifying land use, there's the pressure of demand for housing. So only can work on such a small part of what needs to be done to come to the circular city. So I was really interested in what kind of things you think can be done by designers, by architects, by urban designers to do that part, because it can only be a smaller part, but what should they do to accomplish what we all want to accomplish in time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think actually designers can do a lot, even though they're working on a small piece. So I mean, at the most basic level, there's certain principles that should be applied to each building unit in a circular city, having to do with resource use and management and material management. So there's those basic principles that should apply to every single new building, whether it's temporary or permanent, and that has to do with zero energy footprints, with water capture and recycling, with nutrient recovery from wastewater, all sorts of other aspects of that type. But then I think if you're working on a slightly larger area, you have the opportunity to consider how does this unit interact with flows on a larger scale, with economic activities on a larger scale. And I think even if it's one house, you always have to look at, okay, where is this fitting into what context, and how can you use this as a triggering intervention to maybe transform the area around it. There's a lot of possibility. Of course, it's better when this is coordinated.
But I also think that Mark Robbie addresses a question of power. You can also want to do this, but you have the clients, you have the regulations, etc. So and all these architects aren't going to change that. So what can they do to eventually come to your your vision of how to change this the city into a slightly more circular city?
Well, I think you have this sort of idea of like what you can control, what you can guide, and what you can influence. And so you work within what you can control. So if you have a certain framework that you need to design within, you do the best you can within that framework. Then you see what you can influence. And I think with the case of Bouwsloterham, for example, it's not just about designing one building or one urban plan. It's about building coalitions. It's about communicating with government, reaching across different stakeholder lines, and I think that is a necessary process.
Yeah.
And I think architects should get engaged in that eventually.
Okay, so that's what you say. Do not focus solely on this on your design, on whatever which thing that's printed out, but also design the process more than you have done so far.
I would say so. I think designing I think process-based design is actually a really great thing to consider anyway, because it's much more responsive to changes over time.
Yeah.
So that's something that could be included more.
So you've been hearing this. How would you approach this?
Well, I think one of the key ingredients in making city, which is our task at the end, is to consider the role of the collective. Because I really believe the city is made by very different voices. So
how would you find the collective if you do not know the collective?
Well, you have different tools for that. Yeah. And one could be, for example, using new technologies like networking technologies and building platforms that help stakeholders to be found and get in touch with each other, for example.
But you feel still challenged by what she's telling us?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
As well.
Who are you?
My name is Andrea. I'm Sam. I agree on what he said on what he says, but in a bigger scale, I guess in our case, to develop a project. Actually, I think you can play more on what she says to suggest something more out of your project boundaries.
And how would you surprise the city?
Sorry?
How would you? I just asked the city. When would you be surprised? Well, what type of interventions? How would you go about doing this?
Sorry. Yeah. Or
some questions maybe asked later on. So Eva, Gladek, thank you very much, and please a warm round of applause for Eva.
Thank you.
So now we are switching over to you already hear it, a presentation. Hello. You hear me? Okay. This is Joost Beunderman. You're hearing Joost Beunderman. You're now seeing Joost Beunderman. Joost Beunderman is one of the directors of 00 Architects in London. In the Netherlands, he is known for a publication called A Compendium for the Civic Economy, in which he explores different types of economic activities connected to social developments. A very interesting book, but here in Amsterdam also he was working on the Spontane Stad, one of the publications that also has got a lot of followers in the Netherlands during these last few years. Joost, you're Dutch, but you also live and work in London. Please, Joost, guide us through your presentation.
Thank you. It's great to be with you in spirit and on screen tonight. I have only got a few things to say. First of all, I'm not an expert on Amsterdam, of course. The room is no doubt full of, I think every one of you in the room is more of an expert in Amsterdam than I am. So what I'll talk about is not that, but next slide, please. A more general question. Ooh, next slide, please. I really want to, and I want you to think about, and hopefully we can discuss this, about what truly would be the ingredients of a democratic Amsterdam, and how in your Europan project can you think about those. So next slide, please. The 0-0 is a practice that does all sorts. Right? We do architecture, but we also run workspaces. We happen to have an open source furniture startup. And next slide, please. At the moment, we're working on a project called Dark Matter Laboratories, where we design what we call the institutional infrastructure for a decentralized and more collaborative future. And the reason why we're focusing on that is this book that we published about 7 years ago now, The Compendium for Civic Economy. Next slide, please. In which we looked at 25 examples of this more collaborative future that already exists throughout the UK and elsewhere. Next slide, please. And we weren't, of course, the only ones chronicling this new, exciting, bottom-up and citizen-produced and democratic and entrepreneurial type of city making. Lots of people have chronicled that in different ways. Next slide, please. And of course, what we're seeing is this interesting coming together of the values of civic society with a new type of entrepreneurship generating enormous amounts of energy. Next slide, please. Which helps us to think differently about how cities are being made, not just with large-scale public and private finance, but with distributed resources. Next slide, please. Which ultimately potentially leads to a democratization of production as the big frontier of the 21st century, instead of the 20th century obsession with consumption. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go into these, but there's plenty of real projects. You probably know many of them. And the thing is, they're generating real outcomes. Outcomes to do with energy, the environment, bringing people together, reducing loneliness of older people, that the market and the state finds it very hard to create. So this is very valuable stuff. Next slide, please. An economy, next slide please, potentially led by the many and not by the few. Next slide please. And one that doesn't just create a different economy, but that also brings people together in different ways, right? Like the 21st century barn raising, the stuff that really helped communities in places to confirm what they were about, what the values were, what working together really meant. So this is about more than the economy. Next slide, please. But here's where it becomes difficult. Because we love the examples in all those books, the compendium and all these other books. So we love talking about new ventures and new ideas, and we love heroic entrepreneurship. What we don't love talking about or thinking about is, next slide, please, systems change. This is a complex map of a very peculiar issue. Fish stocks, coastal fisheries, and their embeddedness in a whole series of social and economic relationships in coastal communities, a piece of research by MIT. It's not about the detail of this. The point is, every venture is embedded in resources, rules, institutions, money flows, social contracts, customs that enable every particular venture, every example that we love seeing and talking about to flourish or to go under. And we know how the new city makers in Amsterdam and elsewhere are often under-resourced, stressed, find it hard to explain what impact they have, and that's a problem. So we need to think about the dark matter, the systems change, the many relationships between different complex factors to really enable this more democratic future to happen. Each and every one of the Europan sites, right, they will be a success or a failure, not based just on the architecture and the quality of the urban design, but on the institutional arrangements that we dream up around them. And if we're going to truly look forward to 2040, We really need to do some future casting, right? The problem in London is that we're not able to think beyond managing the now and the urgent crises of gentrification and inequality and a housing market that is exploding and small businesses that are being pressured out of the city because of rising real estate prices. We're not able to think beyond managing the now. Your challenge, I think, in Europan, in Amsterdam, is to really think about the future and the ingredients of a more optimistic future. Next slide, please. So let's not think about a future that's just about a bunch of startups, right? Because I think this obsession with startups is some sort of 21st century type of simplistic thinking about how change happens. It's much more complex than that, as is hopefully obvious. Next slide, please. Elinor Ostrom, a phenomenal thinker and Nobel Prize winner in economy in 2009, put it this way: we need to ask how diverse polycentric institutions help or hinder our future innovativeness, learning, adapting, trustworthiness, levels of cooperation, and more equitable and sustainable outcomes, in this case in Amsterdam, right? That is the challenge. So, what does it mean? Next slide, please. Whatever you design, whatever you generate in your projects, please don't create images like this. Please don't do it, right? Because this is a truly awful image in many ways. I mean, you probably could see the kind of almost inappropriate short-skirted lady kneeling sort of left. They even managed to work that in. This is a truly appalling image. But there's just random Google search, right? But the point is, too many placed visions end up creating sort of meant to be seducing images like this, but they hide all the social relationships, the economic relationships that make this future possible or impossible. This picture is there to lull you asleep, not to help you think creatively and critically about the ingredients of this better future. So at 00, next slide please, we have worked very hard over a long time to think about what are the ingredients of change. So let's think not about architectural renderings and artist impressions, but let's deconstruct that potential future. Let's think about the energy flows. Let's think about the resource flows. Let's think about the governance. Let's think about how places can change over time. Let's think about the finance flows that enable this. Perhaps an investment fund for new ideas, etc. Next slide, please. Let's think about the tactics of change. This is a project that we're doing currently with YMCA, which you'll know from the song, if nothing else. But it's a big, venerable civic institution in central London, which is looking to change its building, but it needs to change as an organization. So we've helped them to think about what that trajectory of change could look like, starting very small, as you see in orange on the left, with a series of small provocations within the building, enabling the members of the fitness club as well as the staff to dream up a different future, so that strategy doesn't just become something top down, but also something that is generated by many people in that organization. Next slide, please. Because top-down innovation is one thing, right, where a small number of people think about what the requirements are, think about what a program could look like, and test something, but that's often big vision, big money, big transformation, but the end point is often set way too early in the process, right? That's top-down traditional innovation. Next slide, please. Cities flourish through agile and enabling ways of working, right? Where you start with something small. The point is you invite lots of collaborators, you build a movement around a place and around objectives. And then you start testing and iterating and failing and starting again, etc. Now, this is for one institution, one building in central London. The sites across Amsterdam, all of them will be different. The tactics of change will be different, but the point is that we need to think about those ingredients of change, not just about the end product. What will genuinely enable, what are the steps towards 2040 and this more democratic future of working, living, and playing together? That's what I want to think about. You can make it as complex as you like. Next slide, please. You can think about outcomes-based urbanism, right? Really thinking about how places connect to the core outcomes that we want: innovation, better educational outcomes, better connectedness, better social fabric across young and old people, so that loneliness and depression, which are the big kind of hidden diseases of the 21st century, get tackled at their root. Right? The point is, all these relationships and all these outcomes are interconnected, and that's what we need to show you. And that's what I love this Europan to dig into. Like I said, you can make it as complex as you like. Next slide. Perhaps this is about new types of investment structures in which, through some sort of impact fund, outcomes-based fund, we can enable large-scale money to connect itself to very small outcomes right in that bottom-up sphere through indirect ways of investing. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this particular slide, because the point is, it's not about what we think are the solutions. It's about your ideas, obviously, and what you think Amsterdam could generate. But the point is, do it. Make these systemic leaps. Think about what in 2040 could be the type of outcomes that we'd love to see, and how the ingredients of place are shaped around us, and what role you, as urban designers, architects, and other professionals can play. And you know, next slide, please. This works at many scales, right? If you take a particular building, this is Somerset House in central London. We did this strategy in a lot of detail. We thought about the entrepreneurs, the funding, the type of funds, the type of exhibitions, the type of festivals that would enable this building to transform. And guess what? Next slide, please. They're doing it. This stuff can become real, right? The individual ingredients that we brought together are slowly, bit by bit, really being executed. But the point is, if we had just shown you this image, we would be lying, right? Because then it would just be a seductive piece of Photoshop. Actually, this is not Photoshop, this is a real image, but you get my point. The point is, this one and the previous image are connected. It's about those two things together. Next slide, please. So if we're going to imagine a radically optimistic future for cities, and we need radical optimism for cities, we have to explore the ingredients of this future: the institutions, the policies, the money and resource flows, the investment capacity, the data, the democratic practices, ownership of governance, etc. What we call the dark matter ingredients of place. Again, I'm not an expert of Amsterdam. I know there's incredible distributed capacity to create the city in Amsterdam, and I think it's one of the cities where this can flourish more than anywhere else, more than in London even. So it's up to you, and I'd love to have a quick discussion on this with you if there is time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joost. So about dark matter, does any one of you have a question for Joost?
If you turn around the computer, I can see the room.
So Joost, you have been discussing things. You have also been urging us not to work with these seductive images. Yet we need seduction. A jury needs seduction. Clients need seduction to be able to actually choose for the disruptive changes that you are proposing. So how would their strategy of seduction proceed? Because I do like the images that you.
Olof, I haven't heard everything because the computer was being turned around, which created a lot of rustling.
Right. Okay.
So and scratching and other noises. So could you repeat it?
Yeah, I will. You were urging us not to use seductive images.
Yes.
And quite vehemently so.
Not just
not
seduction.
just, but
seduction is part of the tactics that we need, but it's not the only one.
Okay, that was what I was wanting you to elaborate a bit more upon, because what you described is wonderful. It's quite complex. It's very complex for small-scale architectural offices, of course, but they need some sort of seduction. And how then would they be able to seduce, first of all, the jury and the clients, but then later on seduce others? Because what you're suggesting is a massive disruptive change in which we organize cities.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, so I showed 3 slides about the YMCA, right? One was the that kind of overview map, and then the 2 in different colors for the different stages, and there were 2 slides on different type of kind of approaches to organizational and place change. For us, in working with the YMCA, it was those 3 images that got us the job. Because there were many images that we could have shown about the future and what the future YMCA club and fitness gym, etc., could look like. The point is, they knew perfectly well that they had no idea how to get from A to B in a way that was true and that was going to work for their organization and that it was going to bring additional resources on the table. It was those 3 images that showed them, the client, that actually we had a plan, that we actually knew what the tactics and politics of change really were, and how we could make that process inclusive, exciting, truly innovative, truly bringing together a range of different type of inputs, and that's what they needed to see. So where it comes to convince the jury, now I don't know exactly who's in the jury. By all means, of course, a killer outcome image is a useful thing to have, right? But then do that overlay. Do that overlay where you actually show of how the different ingredients of your killer image are not just slapped on there because you had a bit of space to fill in the left upper left corner. So you put in, a hot air balloon or a butterfly, but show exactly why each element of your killer image is so important. A famous Dutch author once said that in a good novel, not a single sparrow could fall off a roof without it having meaning, right? I'm afraid that architecture has become, in too many cases, image building, where not all of the image is meaningful. And actually, I love Europan to be about images where every bit has been thought out through, not just in its physical, but also in its institutional nature. What is really
Thank you, Joost. Thank you. We have in the room Peter de Vesche. Peter is a visiting architect for Arkham, for the city of Amsterdam. And Peter, how would you feel about what has been said lately about ways of productivity and about inclusiveness, and especially the fact that these apparently we need to include more of these small-scale businesses, grassroots developments somehow in the city, and we need somehow to spatially provide for them?
I see no reason why we shouldn't. You know, what we're experiencing here is there's 3 speakers addressing a crowd of young architects and designers, and trying to inspire them in this Europan context. And in Europan, what you do as a designer is set an example. You grab the chance, you set an example. If to your knowledge or to your inclination of these young designers, this is something that is important to making the city work, or making that particular part of the city, make the city work better, then go for it. There's no reason to be ironic or cynical or hesitant about it. Just do it.
Yeah. you were questioning in your inaugural speech about the let's say the nostalgia that comes with references to new types of production.
Yes, well, that was a different context than a month and a half ago, but I'll quickly explain that context. My question was, I've been dying to ask that question for years, so I grabbed my chance, which was that I was wondering how nostalgia in architectural and urban design happened to become mainstream. And I was wondering about that because the problems we're supposed to address are not problems from long ago. They are problems for the modern city. They're problems that we and this next generation are supposed to address. So my open question to the audience then was, funny that it became mainstream, and how strange, because we should consider whether that particular set of this toolbox actually helps us solve problems of today. My inclination was to say no, but I put it as an open question, so but you have my answer here.
Thank you, thank you. So we need open questions because that's what Europan is about. We need to also wrap things up. We have been provided by a number of ingredients that may be used into however you design, however you come up with ideas for Europan, for the 5 sites. But before we conclude, I would like to ask Annius Hoornstra, Deputy Director of, what's it in English?
City Development.
City Development. Annius, would you please concisely let us know what you have been taking, what you will take with you from this, but especially what you will send these architects out with.
Okay, that's a few things. And I will address it in the line of the lineup. So first about economics and economic functions. Urban design can be very boring when the only function you have is about residential. And we do have this problem in the city that for a long time they couldn't build offices. Now there's a big discussion not building hotels. We get rid of old workplaces to rebuild new areas. So please do think about what kind of functions we can combine together in the new areas. And combining is not, it can be very simple when you put them together on top of each other, in front or in the back. But then it comes also, how do they combine, not only technical, but also in a way that they create a new community. And I think that that's also about creating spaces, routes. I was thinking about the design from Rem Koolhaas for the library in Paris, which he didn't win. But he made this famous staircase, and besides it there were the books. And his idea was that people will meet each other finding books, and when they meet each other, that's where city life comes together. And we had a discussion a few weeks ago about the Sluisbuurt, and I was telling the audience about that people we want to get to live there. They will have their home as their castle. They will lock the door, and behind the door there's this beautiful view on the city, and well, I wish them all the most beautiful houses in those high-rise buildings. But the people in the audience, they thought that was an awful idea. That people would come from work, park their car, get into the elevator, and have a nice home. And I was trying to explain, and well, it was difficult because of the time of the day. It was late, and but that what the people they do not come together at the entrance of their apartment block. That's not that was the idea in the 60s when we made portique flats. I don't know what's the middle-rise buildings. And we had a discussion with an American architect. He said, well, he was a lecturer in somewhere in Canada, and he said, oh, I really hate your urban planning books. They're about Italy and especially Rome, and what you tell us is that you in the Middle Ages you met in a church, at a marketplace, sometimes in a cafe, but we meet in the park, maybe in the museum. And so there's a new definition, and in working places. So there's a new definition of collective areas, and where do we? So how do we combine residential functions together with economic functions of work? And for me, that's the big question about Europan. It's also for me the answer I would like from you about the topic of inclusiveness. Please do not make statements about the wealthy 1% of the earth, which is very unfair, and that there should be much more room for people and houses for low incomes. We do think that also in the city of Amsterdam. But please make design urban schemes which are so interesting that from that combination of space, new kind of collective focus points in the city will occur. And so I do hope that Europan will help us with that. That's a very good, will be a great answer from your point of view. And so, and then of course circular. Of course, think about how we can combine the energy flows in these areas. You saw the Keuvel. I think the Keuvel is a great example in a small scale of what I was just talking about. So please do make more Keuvels, but then in different forms on different locations.
Thank you, Annius. So people, we are discussing the new Amsterdam model, not just in architecture but also in collectiveness, in inclusiveness, accessibility, not just architecture on the small scale level of the site or a plot, but on the city as a whole maybe. Please take all of this with you, digest it, and come up with ideas that surprises us and ideas that we may actually put into being. I would like to conclude for now. I would like to thank Eva, thank William, Joost Beunderman, who is in London, but all of you as well for joining into this discussion. We still have drinks and we have a sort of a walking dinner, so you can eat something. And of course, we also have a lecture on the productive city by Christian Brett at 8. Annius, thank you very much. Annius is the one who is mainly responsible for the fact that we have these 5 sites in Amsterdam. And for asking you or challenging you to come up with all these new ideas. Thank you, Annius. Thank you.
I would like to thank you and be creative. Please, we need that.